So we're going to jump right into the stuff I got into in July of 2025. We're going to start off with my planners. And I can't honestly remember if I showed this planner before. I was previously the first half of the year using a Hobonichi Cousin. That was my big A5 with the monthlies and the weeklies and the dailies, and it just got to be all too much. I made a few videos talking about it, so I won't go into too much detail with that here. But I did end up just picking up another Hobonichi Weeks to just use as my everyday planner because I really don't need anything really super fancy. So I've just been kind of taking this as an opportunity to really keep track of my task list, which is the main things, appointments that I have, meetings, recordings, collabs with other people, stuff like that. And then I have been kind of tracking my habits over on the side, which loosely relate to my Gamify my life stuff. So we'll take a look at that here in a minute. But I just kind of wanted to touch base with where this is headed in terms of my planning. I'm loving just being back in my Hobonichi Weeks. It's just so much more manageable for me. I can just keep track of the things that I really need to keep track of, and I don't feel the need to overfill it with all of the other things where I'm just literally kind of filling space. The one thing that I have noticed is moving away from having my tarot journaling in my planner is that I am not doing as much tarot journaling right now as I was before, and that's totally fine because I am at this place in my life where I've got a bunch of projects, actual work projects going on, and I really don't have the time to be really deep diving into every single reading that I do. Now that doesn't mean that I'm not still working with tarot. I absolutely am, and we'll talk about all the decks that I use because there were quite a few of them. I just haven't been recording them in the same way. So I've just gone back to using my weeks as my actual weekly setup, my task list, tracking my habits and things of that nature, and it's been really great. So just a real quick touch base with that because that has definitely changed throughout the month of July. I am still working in my quest log, and I cannot remember again if I also updated you all on where this is at or not, but throughout the month of July, I kind of, again, taking a little bit of a step back, kind of reducing some of the extra stuff that I do because I need to make space for more actual workload. So I have been tracking my same 5 skills, although I have adjusted, and I don't know if I mentioned that in a previous video, so I'll just quickly touch upon that here. I've broken down my life into basically 5 categories. For July through December, a few of my categories have changed, and I've got my old ones here just so that I can reference them if I need to. The biggest being really just insight and wisdom. So insight before was sort of like personal growth tarot for me. Through this latter half of the year, as I'm focusing on writing actually a couple of different books at the moment, I really wanted to make that one of my main categories because I need to be tracking my writing, my progress, things that I'm doing in relation to that. So I changed my insight to be related to all of the tasks that I have to do with writing. And then I moved all of the tarot and spirituality into my wisdom category, which was before just kind of spirituality. They really do go hand in hand, so it makes sense to have them in the same category, but also just really important to note that this changes as I need it to. My rules are not hard and fast. So when things shifted in my life and I started focusing more on writing and less on other things, then I needed my Gamify to reflect that in order for it to still be relevant. But as far as the weeks go, I'm still tracking things pretty much the same way. I've got my little colored dots relating to all my things. Every time I do something in that category, I just put a little dot in here. Some days obviously are heavier than others. You can see I tend to trail off over the weekends, and that's because I get busy doing things, usually with my husband. And then every week I do my Gamify reading. We'll talk a little bit about the decks that I use for that. I use the decks on average about 2 months. So in July I switched. So July and August I'll be using the same set of decks, and I kind of switched up the way that I kind of record them, as you can see here. I also didn't use any dice casting with Gamify throughout the month of July. I am going back to that in August. I just took a little bit of a break from it, mostly because I was working very heavily with some dice stuff in some other places, and so I just kind of took a little step back here. So I'm just tracking what I do daily. I track my categories here. I write down my reflection from my reading, so my cards, whatever came up for me. I tend to do that most Mondays, and it is a reflection on the week previous, but it also is a sort of week ahead style reading. And really, as I go through this Gamify process, it's actually turning more and more into a week ahead more than a previous week reflection. So like I did on Monday, today's Monday the 4th as I'm recording this, and I did my Gamify here and I have all my cards listed and you can see I haven't filled out. But what I've been doing is most of the time at the end of the day, sometimes I'll do 2 days at once, but I just go back in and fill in my little dots. At the end of the week, I add them all up and I put them in here. And then at the end of every month, I total up everything up. And this is just so that I can see where I'm making progress. And having switched some of my categories around, I can see there's definitely been an increase. There was a huge increase in July for me for my charisma, which is my relationships, because I have been doing a lot of collabs and chats and meeting with people and talking with people. And every time I do that, I count that as part of my charisma work. And then I have my daily totals for however many categories I interacted with that day. So on Tuesday the 1st, I interacted with 3 of my categories. And then I have my XP earned down here. So in the back here, I'll just do a real quick touch base. I mean, I have some goals, some notes. This is my sort of XP tracker overall. So how many points I got in each one. And every time I complete a month, I get to fill in my little XP bar. So here was the first half of the year with all of my totals, my total XP earned. Some months were better than others. That's totally okay. And then I have my little bar filled in here. And this is just a fun way for me to like visually reference my own growth and how things are going and what I'm progressing in. So in the back here, I have each of my 5 categories, some of the things that I kind of do to kind of connect with those categories. And then I have a list of decks that I'm working with for each of them. I have a blank page in between, which tends to like just group up and get skipped. So it's great, but it's there if I need it. Again, reflecting here that I changed my insight category from personal growth to writing related, and again, my decks. And I've just been keeping track of that through here. And in the back, if you haven't seen it before, is some of my dice rolls. So when I want to use dice to pick card prompts or to do tarot readings with, I have some tables in the back here for that. Again, I'll leave a link to the original video where I talk about my whole Gamify My Life process. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the decks that I worked with throughout the month. All right, so first I want to talk about a couple of decks that I use for general readings, but also for some very specific things. This is the 5 Cent Tarot, and this is a new deck to me. I don't know why I have trouble opening this box, because it's upside down, that's why. I picked up the 5 Cent Tarot specifically. Here's the backs. You can choose different back colors, which is really fun. I chose this gray, yellow. Honestly, I don't like the gray and yellow together. I think it's like really clashes, but I love the gray edges and that's why I chose it. So I picked that one for that particular reason. So the 5 Cent Tarot is really cool because it's got kind of this like layered, collected magpie kind of energy to it, where we see a lot of different things represented on each of the cards. And you'll see here that this is a very word heavy deck as well. So we have not only what the card is, so this is the 4 of Cups, but we also have sort of a reversed and upright keywords for it. We have contemplation and motivation over here. And there's some other keywords that are mixed into this deck. And I think that's really cool. I don't often work with tarot decks that have keywords on it, but when they are designed to be specifically a part of the deck and they're integrated into the artwork in the way that this one is, I'm totally on board for adding those keyword layers into my work. Generally, I don't like other people's keywords because, you know, I kind of like use my own stuff that works for me, that resonates with me on a personal level. But these have been really cool to tap into that. Now, I very specifically went after this deck because I was looking for something that had kind of like that carnival vibe to it. And there's a very specific reason for that because it relates to one of my fiction projects that I'm working on. And so I went after this one specifically to get it to not only work with on a daily basis to just kind of help me immerse myself in this type of an energy, in this type of world, but also to use in relation to my work writing a book. So I've got this one that I've been having a blast working with. And of course I had to pair it with an oracle because you know how that goes. And that's just my jam these days. I have Mother Mort's Carnival. This one actually does come in a really cool box and it's got like a big book too that I think has stories in it. I haven't actually read it yet. One of the things with this deck is I do find that I need to actually use the guidebook, and like I'm okay to make that exception on occasion. It's a beautiful deck. It's got some gorgeous dark green gilding to it and I really love the artwork, but as you can see it just has like a title. There's no keywords. So without the guidebook I have no clue what I'm looking at. or like, okay, well, I know what I'm looking at. I have no clue what it means in a divinatory sense. And so I definitely find that I have to use the guidebook with this deck, but that's okay. I'm willing to do that because the energy and the messages are so on point with these two. This was such a beautiful little pairing and I really enjoyed working with it. But see, again, like Mother Mort, I have to get into the guidebook to see who and what that is. So let's just go ahead and do that really quickly while we're here. And of course, I totally skipped it. Okay, so for each card, it does have a little bit of a backstory on the character, which I really like, and then it just has the interpretation. So this card is the Great Mother, the Matriarch, the Empress, the Creator, the Nurturer. So I can tie into all of that in terms of my reading. So I'm looking at that energy between the 10 of Matches and the 5 of Cups. Now, although I have them paired like this in this little like, you know, how I typically do playing with pairs, flipping through. When I actually worked with these, I layered a lot of different things in here. I did end up pulling in some other decks. Some of them were great, some of them were a miss. I didn't grab all of those out because what I pulled into my readings in terms of additional decks with these two, these were the primary source decks, just depended on the energy, the day, the what I was doing the reading about. And so sometimes it would be like some little oracles, sometimes it was some playing cards. It just depended on what I was trying to get at with this particular pairing. So I'm not going to pull all of those in, but I did tie in to the keywords. So a lot of times what I did in working with this card is I would have my central card here. This I approached really like an archetype. So who was guiding this reading? Who was giving me this message? And then I looked to the tarot to look at the message that they were giving me. So the Sphinx was giving me the message about the Queen of Cups and the Six of Needles. And then what I would do is pull in additional cards to look at further into empathy, further into martyrdom, further into rite of passage, and further into, I can't read that one, change of plans. So I would work with it in this very like kind of layered sort of way. And maybe just real quick, I'm going to flip through a couple just so you can see them together. And then I'm going to go ahead and just like show you a little sample. I'm not going to pull out, again, all of the decks that I did this with, but I'll just show you a little quick sampling of how I worked with these with all of those keywords. So the other deck I pulled out here is the, I can never remember the name of this deck. It is like Between the Worlds, Beyond the World, something like that. It's a cute little great mass market oracle. I have completely modded mine, so I've edged it in this kind of like vintagey photo thing going on, and then I also stamped keywords on it. So the guidebook has some great keywords. There's 2 for each, I do believe, and I just went ahead and stamped those on here because this deck without keywords really wasn't that usable for me. So that's definitely one that I tied into quite a bit in my work with these 2 decks. So let's just do a little quick sample reading so that I can show you how I worked with these in that sort of bigger, robust reading. I'm going to say sample reading, but you know how this goes. It will always call me out. So really, it's not a sample reading. We'll just go ahead and do a reading. I did use this a lot with my writing work. So it wasn't always necessarily like, what do I need to know as a individual? Sometimes it was around like writing and my novel and things like that. So I used it a lot in that respect. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull basically what is an archetypal energy. So we got the Astounding Lady Makara. We've got her. She's going to be our guiding archetype for this reading. So let me just jump into the guidebook, and we just want to kind of touch base with her and see what she represents. It says, often things do not go our way, which can be difficult for us to accept, but our refusal to do so can hinder our personal growth. This card means accepting something that you've been struggling with, even if it's unpleasant or hard to swallow. So finding that acceptance even when we have resistance to it. Okay, so that's the archetypal energy. That's who's coming to this reading and what they're going to be giving us a reading about. I feel like my camera is not wanting to focus at all on these cards. So we shall see how it goes. Okay, so that's our energy for this particular reading. That's who is guiding the reading, and that is sort of the message and the energy that she's bringing to us. So we're just going to dive in here really quickly and pull a couple cards from the 5-cent tarot to see what her little message is going to be about. Okay, so we got the Wheel of Fortune. So we have destiny and misfortune. So those are our two keywords we've got going on the top and bottom. And we've got the Emperor with authority and control. Okay, interesting. So we've got those two. Now I'm just going to pull these little cards. Now the other thing we could do is pull another oracle in as well to provide a wrap up for this. And sometimes I did that after I was done kind of going through what the bulk of the reading was. So let's just give these a little shuffle real quick. So let's see what Destiny has to say. We've got Seeker with messages. So the Raven, Seeker and Messenger. And then we've got the Doll's Arm with assist and impede. So this one is interesting because we could keep going. Right? I could keep layering because there's two keywords. So for authority, we've got threat and safety. So the way I'm kind of looking at these now is she's like, this is a thing that you have to swallow, and maybe this is how you can swallow it. So you're having to deal with threat and safety in terms of authority. So in order to get to safety, you got to acknowledge that threat that comes through authority. Hopefully that makes some sense. So we've got the doll's leg with mobility and immobility here in control. So what is kind of underneath that, what's going on in this safety is that you're feeling like you can't move forward, you can't have that growth because of this threat happening through the authority, right? That's the hard thing that's to swallow. And then we've got over here the Wheel of Fortune with the Raven, with the Seeker, that Messenger, and the Doll's Arm with the assist and impede. Interesting here that we have the arm and the leg. And so this is telling us that, we need to pay attention to those messages to help us get through this. I'm not going to really go really deep into this reading because I don't want this to turn into that. I just kind of wanted to show you how I was working with these in terms of working with all of the words that were on the cards. Knocking my dice around. And it was a really great little reading and experience to be able to work with them in this way. So similarly, I ended up pulling out oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of this deck either. It's a little graveyard deck by the creator of the Southern, the Southern Botanical, the Southern Gothic. I think it's Roses and Ash or something like that. Anyway, I do this video in my membership space where I kind of go through and I pick out decks that I want to work with for the month. And I had pulled out, this is the Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's Tarot of the Macabre Monsters and Autumn Scenes, I do believe. It is an indie deck. It is definitely one of my favorites. I think this is also an indie deck as well. And I pulled this one out because, again, looking at the energy of what I was working with in terms of my writing projects, and I was really focused on my novel, and there is a ghostly element to my novel, and it's kind of got this gothic feel to it. So I felt like this is a really good one to represent that. It's kind of like the Carnival 5-cent is kind of like my character's backstory, and then this is kind of like her current place, where she currently is in the world. And so it was a really great one for tapping into where she is currently, what's going on now with her. And I did occasionally pull this in with the other two decks. It's definitely something that I intended to do, but I found that I really just ended up working with these kind of on their own. These ones are just great little graveyard inspired scenes, and they've got just a great succinct keyword, and I really enjoy working with these together. But it's definitely kind of that gothic sort of graveyard, ghosty sort of vibe that I was definitely looking at. Look at, we got Insight with the Emperor and the Queen of Wands. Love that. And occasionally I did, again, pull all of them in together if I was kind of exploring the past and the present for this character. But I also use them for my own personal reading. So when I'm working on a book, and particularly fiction, sometimes with nonfiction too, but I do like to kind of immerse myself in the world in which I'm creating. And so bringing that through decks, through my tarot practice, is a huge part of that, because these tell me those stories. They help me to tap into that energy and to access it. And before I would sit down to write, I would pull a few cards, and kind of depending on what I thought I was going to be focusing on within the story, I would pull cards, either this selection of decks or the other selection, whether I was kind of like going to be exploring things from the character's past or from her present. And so this was a really great way for me to tap into that energy and to just kind of set the stage and get myself in that space, to be, stepping into her world. And it worked really beautifully for that, because this really does represent that energy really well. Occasionally, I also pulled the Southern Gothic in, because my story takes place in Kentucky, so it kind of pulls that energy in, and added a little bit of that as well, and that's sitting here on my table because it's one I used for my Gamify. We'll take a look at that here in a moment. But this was a really great little pairing for that. But again, I also used it for just my everyday sort of readings, right? If I was just feeling in this space, in this sense, I just want to kind of pull a few cards and see what messages are coming through for me. So let's just go ahead and do that for fun. Since I didn't go into like the whole memories thing here this time, I have a very busy month in August, and so I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional with the content that I create and the time that I am spending working, because I have a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff that I need to get done. And also I have, like, at the time you all are seeing this, well, if you see it on the day I release it, Lisa will be on a plane to come and see me, and we are having a staycation at my house. So I wanted to make sure that all of my ducks were in a row before she got here, so we could focus on just hanging out and having fun and enjoying each other's company. So I'm really trying to stay focused so that I can get everything done that I need to get done. But since we're here, let's just pull a card, because I just kind of want to share with you a little bit how I work with these when I'm just reading for myself. Okay, so I've got sorrow. All right, that's fun. I mean, that's valid. There are definitely some things that I am in that energy around. I love when the cards call me out. Even though I tend to do pairings, when I show you playing with pairs, I tend to do them at like the 3 card. But like, honestly, these days when I read, I tend to use 4 cards. And what I'm basically doing, even though I don't necessarily like say that these are the prompt positions, what I'm basically doing is the oracle is always right here, and it's serving as my focal point. What is this reading about? What's the underlying energy? And then I'm kind of using these cards around it in this configuration as, in a sense, like a past, present, future, or a conscious, subconscious, superconscious, depending on sort of where I'm feeling in the moment. So if I'm using this as like the past, right? This is what's behind me. I've got the world. The star is my present. And then the Chariot, I have all majors. That's really cool with this sorrow energy. There's some big sorrow energy going on here. Then I have the Chariot with my future, right? Like what this energy, how it might manifest if I continue on the path that I'm on. I don't really work with future positions that often, because I think it's always changing, and it's like from moment to moment it's changing. So I don't feel like it's ever set. But I feel like in this sense, it kind of gives me the trajectory of where I'm headed if I continue in this sorrow cycle that I'm in. How I most often tend to use these is, this is what's going on consciously. This is what I'm aware of. I'm aware of sorrow with the world. Yeah, that's very true. And then what's underneath it, what's the subconscious, the you could even say this is in the shadow, depending on the type of work that you tend to do and the like type of language that you like to use with your cards. But this is the underneath. This is the subconscious. And I've got the star. So there's a subconscious hope of knowing that things are going to come out of this sorrow spiral in terms of the world. This feels like very big picture energy. This feels like it's not talking about my daily life, right? Because I've got a lot of majors on the table. it's feeling like it's big picture energy. And then over here, I've got the super conscious. So this is what my higher self is trying to get me to recognize. And here I have the Chariot. So there's going to be movement forward. I'm not going to get stuck here. I'm moving forward. I'm always moving forward. And I can choose to carry that energy with me. And that tends to be how, when I just throw down cards like this for a daily reading, or just like, what do I need to know right now? This tends to be the configuration that I use these days. Those kind of 3 tarot, 1 oracle. I just find that it works really well for just kind of getting at the heart of whatever's going on. And then obviously, you know, because I'm huge into dice casting, I will often dice cast over the top of that and use those interpretations to really get at, you know, the nitty-gritty details, the overarching, and the big and the little energies that happen with these types of readings. Okay, so let's talk about the decks that I used for my Gamify readings for the month. Again, I showed a little bit of that in the beginning, unless you skipped forward, totally cool. I've got a whole video about it. I have been keeping my Gamify and my Enchanted library decks in these little baskets on my desk, so they are just kind of all together. And we'll just take a quick flip through, talk about the decks that I've been using for this process. Again, each one taps into one of these categories. So we'll just pull this up so we have it for our reference here as soon as I can get to that page. All right, so there's our list. Remember, I'm gonna just set that over there. So my wisdom deck that I've been working with this month has been the Brian Froud Fairies Oracle. Again, I kind of have like this, I feel like this overall sort of vibe that kind of just goes through all of my stuff. They do tend to loosely relate to each other. I really love working with this deck, although I can't read the titles most of the time. So I do actually have the guidebook for this one on my desk as well, because not only can I not read the titles, but I really don't know much about these little fae yet, and I'm still getting to know them. But I really loved having them for my wisdom category, for my wisdom readings. They were really like kind of creating that, again, that archetypal guide, that energy that's going to sit with me through the week, guide me through what I need to know. And I just love having this little fae energy. It's not little fae. I say that. That's very dismissive. It's very big, very potent fae energy. It's one of the reasons I really, really like this deck. And I really enjoyed having them, having a little fae. I did it again. I really enjoyed having a fae to sort of sit with me and guide my life, my work, my readings, whatever, throughout the month. And it was a really great experience working with them in that way. So we'll kind of keep them out here. I'm going to try, I totally skipped down my list, but let's go back to the top of the list. So my Vitality deck, which is related to movement, health, wellness, things like that, is the Mushroom Oracle. And again, this is a category that I've kind of adapted a little bit because I am using it not only for physical health, but also mental and emotional health as well, because those are just as important. So I use the Mushroom Oracle because I love that it kind of has that like rooted, grounded, you know, sort of mushroomy vibe. That sounds silly, but you know what I mean. Like it feels very rooted, very grounded, and I feel like that was definitely an energy that I was needing to pull into my life these days. It's got some great titles and keywords on it. This is one of my favorites to use in readings, but it worked really well to kind of get at like that grounding, sort of rooted vitality energy, kind of like what do I need to ground into? And that's kind of how I worked with it throughout the month. So like, what did I need to ground into? Coral, so complexity, aspiration, and structure. Or spores, opportunity, luck, diffusion. It worked really well for that, and I really enjoyed having it as sort of that kind of beneath grounding into energy in my Gamify. And these basically have become like my week ahead readings in a sense. So my Insight deck, which I again switched that category over to be more writing, less specific tarot, I used the Inner Eye Oracle. And this was a really interesting one because it's playing cards. And all of it has, every playing card has keywords on it. One of the reasons why I chose this for my writing deck is because in my novel, my character works with playing card divination. And so I have been trying to, get better with playing card divination. So I thought this was a great one to use. I love having it in here. I love the keywords. It worked so well for kind of like honing into that energy. And I wasn't sure, like when I put all these on the table, like how it was gonna work together. But actually it worked really beautifully. The keywords were always spot on. I'd get into the little guidebook to kind of further that message, and it just worked really, really well. Tuning into that writing, where do I need to go? What do I need to be focusing on? And it just was a beautiful combination with the rest of these decks, kind of surprisingly so to me. I wasn't expecting it to be. Okay, and then my charisma deck. So that was my relationship deck. I used my Southern botanical deck. And again, another one of my favorite oracles. I feel like this worked really well for charisma because, you know, it's plants and plants are communal. You know, for the most part, like they grow in gardens and in forests and things like that. And I really enjoyed working with this one. I love that I had the plant energy to pull into, but again, like some of my favorite, you know, oracle decks, I also have some keywords. So that means that I can really work with this without having to get into the guidebook, but it's there, like, right, the guidebook's there if I want it, which is great. I don't know that I actually ever got into the guidebook for this one for the month, because really I just pull a plant, and what I'm connecting with is those keywords. So in my charisma, in my relationships, we had deadly nightshade and we had vanity and self-absorption. If I pulled that card, I might be like, okay, I'm not paying enough attention to the people in my life, right? Or if I've got strawberries with fertility and youth, that would tell me that maybe I need a little bit more playtime with in my relationships. And so this worked actually really well in that position for that sort of plant charisma energy coming through. And again, I really like it with this whole like selection of decks here. Again, having the fairies to kind of guide me, the mushrooms to ground me, and then tapping into those kind of key aspects of, you know, relationship and writing. And then my dexterity is my work deck. So I use the peculiar pathways for this. I absolutely love this tarot deck. Here's the backs. Beautiful, beautiful matte gilding. It is the most perfect example of collage. I just absolutely love it. I think it's such a beautiful deck. It works so well. And it was a great one for my dexterity deck of like, what do I need to hone into for work? Right? What do I need to know about that? So even though it's going to make a mess on my table, I'm just going to flip through a couple of these together so you can kind of see how I was working with them. This was not actually how I had them laid out. So maybe we'll just like put them as they were, if I can get them all to fit and not go completely off camera. But this was kind of the configuration that I most often worked with them in, where I had my fairies up here kind of guiding the reading, the mushrooms underneath that were kind of like supporting that message. And then I had my dexterity and my writing. I put those together over here because writing is also a part of my work, right? It's a part of my job, and it's definitely something that I wanted to keep in mind, that these two are connected, but they do also exist in separate categories for me. And then I had my relationship, my charisma stuff over here. So we'll just flip through a couple really quickly, just so you can see how they kind of all went together. I know I posted a few pictures of them on Instagram as well. I really enjoyed letting these decks just kind of play on my table together. It's a lot of interesting energy coming through. You know, we've got fairies and we've got some collage and we've got mushrooms and flowers, and then we've got playing cards. And it was just a really fun way to interact with that Gamify. Again, I wasn't using dice casting throughout July, but I'm definitely going to be incorporating that back in August. I'm going to have a huge pile of cards to clean up at the end of this, but that's okay. It's totally worth it. So yeah, I really enjoyed having this energy as what really ended up being my week ahead. And I think when I started the Gamify practice, I was like, I will pull cards on Monday, because I have to earn the cards, right? So if I earn the cards last week, then I get to pull the cards from each of the categories, which basically means I have to do something in that category every single week. At this point, because I've been doing this for a full 7 months now, I just kind of automatically, like habitually, hit every category, every note. And also I'm adjusting my categories to make sure that they fit my life and what I've got going on. And so it makes it really easy to make sure I'm actually hitting all those categories. And knowing that now that that's kind of the approach that I'm taking with it, I'm actually using these more of a week ahead, right? So what do I need to know for the upcoming week, for this week? Because I do these readings on Mondays, and it kind of just gives me like an overview. Let's see what we get. I mean, I already did my reading for the week, but so we have the I think that says Moon's Laughter. Again, I definitely have to get into the guidebook with the fairies. It does not work for me very well outside of that, but it's totally worth it because the guidebook's great. So this would be my fairy guiding my message for the week. My vitality, my growth, what's going to ground me into is we have tree with stable, slow, and partnership. That's beautiful. And then over here in dexterity, we have the Two of Swords. And for my insight with writing, we have the Stranger. And if we're here in charisma for relationships, we have the White Pine with longevity and bright future. And so I kind of pull all those together into reading as kind of like, what do I need to know for this week to guide me? And they worked beautifully for that. Okay, so see this giant pile of cards that I made? So now we get to just play this game really quickly where I'm going to play like deal a card, put them all back, and then clear them off so we can take a look at the next decks. So our next selection of decks, or I guess really the last selection of decks I have to share with you today, is the decks that I used in my Enchanted library. So that is the guided tarot practice that I do here in the membership on my channel. I've got all my decks that I use for the month in this little basket, again just sitting off on the side of my desk so that's easy for me to grab. I am keeping a record of all of my card pulls and my entire Enchanted library journey in this little Archer and Olive traveler size notebook. In July, we were stepping into the story of Thumbelina. So the work that we did revolved around the themes and motifs found within that story, not necessarily one for one, but kind of just like the overarching energy you find. I write a little bit of a story, so it's a little bit of a narrative journey. We pull some cards and roll some dice for kind of those archetypal energies throughout the month. And I'll just give you a quick flip through so you can see. So every week we have our theme, we pull some cards around it, we do some readings, we do some dice casting or some additional sort of bonus activities. And it's just a great way to engage with tarot through the lens of story and the lessons and the motifs that we learn through working with fairy tale and fantasy. And it's been a really great one. I really enjoyed working with this one. We did have a bonus activity for this particular month. And this is really, for the most part, the only tarot journaling that I did throughout the month of August, because I am in the process of also building a junk journal, and I'm doing that again in my membership. I've done a few lives at this point, and I'm working on building a junk journal to transform into my tarot journal. But I do also have just some regular journals running around here. I also have all of my secret tarot journals, and so that was one of the reasons why I kind of like moved away from doing the sort of daily tarot journaling thing, because I have the Enchanted library stuff. I have a regular just like notebook, like it's just sitting right here, like it's just a regular notebook that I can do some journaling in, and then I have all of my secret tarot journals, and between all of that, like I'm covered. So the decks that I chose for the Enchanted library practice, I do always have this is my Memento Mori from Black and the Moon. I do always keep that on hand because that is my caretaker deck. So anytime I need to pull cards from my caretaker, your caretaker is like the person who walks us through this journey. This is my little black onyx skull. It's my little symbol for my caretaker. So like he hangs out with me here, and I will always pull cards if I need to from him. I do like to theme my decks around the energy of the story. So I chose a couple of decks. I absolutely knew this tarot. I knew exactly what tarot I was going to work with. But every week we have sort of a guiding card that we pull. So kind of like, what's the guiding energy for the work for the week, lessons that we're going to learn. And for that, I use the Woodland Wardens. I really love this deck. It's got, I've talked about it before, but it's got the plants and the animals. We do have the titles, so it tells us what animal and what plant, and then every card has a keyword, and that is absolutely foundational. Absolutely need a keyword on all of my Oracle decks because otherwise I can't use them. But this one was a great one for just pulling for that sort of overarching energy for the week, because I could tap into the animal, the plant, and the keyword. So it was kind of like multi-layered in that sense, because I had all three of those things that I could work with and pull into that overarching message and that guidance for the week. So I used that as primarily as like, what's the guide for the week? What's the main energy? And then I did a combination of pulling in these two decks, because I do like to have, I tend to use Oracle as my guiding message for the week, and then I do like to have one tarot, one Oracle for the most part, to work with the prompts that are actually within the PDF that I provide every month. So this is my Heartwood Tarot. I absolutely love this, and this feels like a Thumbelina deck to me, because it feels like we are stepping into this little world, and this, for me personally, is a deck that I go to when the rest of the world feels very, very big and overwhelming. So I can come into this deck and imagine myself as sort of like in this world with these little characters, and it's something about walking with them makes the rest of the world not feel so big and scary. And I just really love it. I have multiple copies of this deck now. I'm pretty sure that this is actually the prototype, which I should probably, like, I think I have at least two other versions of this deck that are like the proper versions, and I'm pretty sure this is the prototype that like came, and I like actually rounded the corners and everything, and like I don't know, I'm just attached to this particular copy, right? It just, I've imbued it with my energy now. It's got its own little special bag, and like while the other ones are like definitely, they're sitting on my shelf, I love them, I am like no intention of getting rid of them, and sometimes I do pull those ones out as well. There's just something about this one that's just like, it's already got all of my energy in it. It's kind of big and thick though, so I'm gonna just kind of tuck it down a little bit, because I want to just kind of show you how I worked with these together. So I had the Heartwood was my main like tarot, and then I used my Cottage Witch Oracle, and this is a beautiful oracle deck created by my friend Krista over at Krista Chronicles. I'm sure y'all have seen it. Like, this deck is absolutely everything. I love it. Again, we have the animal or the thing, it's not always an animal, the title and the keyword. And that is just absolutely imperative for me with an oracle deck. And this one I used, I feel like I used a lot of it. I used it a lot for the first prompt. So whatever the first prompt was, I think I used it once or twice for the end prompt, right? The last position in the tarot spread. But I really liked using it actually in the first position of the tarot spread, because I have like kind of this overarching energy. And the first position in the tarot spread is kind of like, what's our jumping off point? What are we getting into here? And then I used this with its title and its keyword to kind of set the tone for that. And then I worked with the Heartwood as, you know, really diving deeper into exploring those messages. But together, they're just like, these three together are just really beautiful. Let's make a big pile again. So we have the moth, the eucalyptus with endings, with the star, and the skunk with boundaries. I mean, how beautiful is that? Yes, endings are important. They bring us hope and everything, but we do have to remember that we have to keep our boundaries around those types of things as well, right? So we have the bobcat and the blackthorn with patience, the two of pentacles, and mint with abundance. It takes patience. Things take time. You gotta have patience. Let things develop in their own way. I just really love the way these all work together. And it was such a great experience to kind of really tap into that Thumbelina energy, to learn the lessons within the Thumbelina story, and to really sink into these worlds that these decks created. So I do oftentimes actually use my Enchanted library decks for other things beyond just the Enchanted library. So let me put these all back together, and I'm going to show you another way that I work with these. Like to work with my Enchanted library decks outside of that practice. Part of it is they're also just here on my desk, and I do have a tendency to just work with whatever's in front of me. So it's kind of why I've developed the habit of not only separating out my Gamify decks from my Enchanted library decks, but then every month gathering in my member space, hanging out, talking about the decks that I'm going to work with in the upcoming month, so that I can just pull them out and get them here on my table, because the more available they are to me, the more often I will get into them and use them. Now, that doesn't mean I don't use other decks throughout the month, because I certainly do. and I'll pull things off my shelf for whatever thing I've got going on. If you watched Danny and I's first Creative Chaos video, we just pulled decks at random, and that's like a really wonderful thing to do. Also, that was such a fun experience. I cannot wait for our next one. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. We did this crazy like narrative storytelling gameplay thing with cards on my channel, and then we journaled about the experience over on Danny's channel. It was such a fun experience. Cannot wait for the next one. Okay, so a lot of times how I worked with this deck is particularly because of the nature of these decks. When I was feeling any sort of overwhelm, I would come and I would pull a wooden wardens. I cannot talk today. So we got the beaver and birch with home. That is absolutely beautiful. So then what I would do is pull a card for each of those energies. And I would do that with the Heartwood Tarot. So just give it a little shuffle. Just kind of have a little cozy monthly reflections this month, I feel like. I feel like I was definitely trying to pull that cozy energy in a little bit, even though it's like summer and it's hot half the time, but it's just feeling a need for some cozy vibes. So I love pulling these ones when I'm just kind of feeling in that space of, I'm a little bit overwhelmed right this 5 minutes, and I just need a little bit of comfort and support. So I've got the beaver and birch. So I'm going to pull a heartwood for the beaver. And we got the 5 of Pentacles. And then I'm going to pull a card for the birch. And we got the devil. Oh, interesting. Okay, now because I am not super familiar with plants and animals, I do get into the guidebook. Now, also keeping in mind that I am doing this as like a cozy kind of take a break, have a moment, reconnect with myself, with my cards, with my practice, whatever it is. So having to kind of look things up is okay in these kind of moments, because like this is the whole point. I'm trying to get into the space, right? I'm trying to take a break from whatever it is causing me stress or anxiety. And so getting into the guidebook is great for this. So let's just go ahead and check it out. So we've got the beaver. I just saw it, the beaver and the birch. I really hate the setup on this guidebook. I really wish they had done regular numbers and not Roman numerals, because my Roman numerals get confusing after a while. Okay, so we're going to look at what beaver represents. So it says the beaver works hard to build the lodge where it raises its young. Using twigs, grass, rocks, and muds, it constructs a safe environment for the family as well as a natural habitat for migrating birds. So we've got the 5 of Pentacles here, the idea of the beaver of creating space, right? And it's interesting here because this little fox is like outside of the cottage, right? Outside of that space. So this would cue me into kind of looking at, where am I not creating that space for things to grow, for things to be nurtured, right? It talked about raising its young and creating safe environments, not only for itself, but for others. So this might encourage me to look at, like, where am I creating a disconnect with that? Where am I not building those things that I need to nurture and support that growth for myself, to create that home environment for myself as well as others? So that might encourage me to kind of think about that, to explore that a little bit. So then we go into birch. So birch talks about, symbolizes new beginnings, and they seldom grow alone. In medieval Europe, they were used as maypoles in pagan celebrations of midsummer. Because their wood was thought to protect the young and ward off evil spirits, it was used to build cradles. So interesting. So again, talking about building and new beginnings. And here with the devil, like, we have that whole idea of kind of like what's entangling us, what's trapping us up, what's keeping us from doing the work of building what we need in order to create this safe environment, this home environment for us. This would give me just some things to think about. I'm going to look at the upright meaning. So it says, now is the time to focus on nesting, homesteading, and settling down. Decorate to tend your environment in a way that supports a feeling of home. So again, looking at that idea of, what do I need to build, maybe in a physical sense? How can I bring some of that comfort and create space for that in a way through where I physically am? Also looking at, we've got the pentacles, the sort of resource, the mundane, the physical suit. So it definitely would be looking at, do I need to like do some cleaning, some rearranging? This for me is tying into, I think, the fact that, like, let's just get personal for a minute. My oldest is moving back in for a while, and that means that my game room is going to get dismantled, and I'm going to bring all that back into this space here so that we can create space for him. And I feel like I have some feels around that. I know I do. So like, this is just me acknowledging to myself that I know I have some feels around that, and that's just something that I need to work on in order to create a good, stable environment for all of us. That's kind of that energy that it's tying into and making me think of right now, because that is on my mind. But now I want to pull like a sort of wrap up, and I've got this keyword of home. So even though this has keywords on it, I'm gonna pull a card for home, and I've got squirrel with resourceful. So that again is making me think about, what can I do to create this environment, to kind of step outside of this sort of disconnected energy that I have going on in the Five of Pentacles and the Devil, in a sense, kind of rebuild space for a kid moving back home, right? So we're not going to be empty nesters anymore. And so it's giving me the opportunity to look at where I can do that. And I love these readings in this sense, because while I may sit down here with the idea of like, I just need to take a break, and you know, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, a lot of times it gets at what's underneath that, because most of the time, whatever it is that I'm feeling overwhelmed about is not what's on the surface, right? Like, it's usually not I'm feeling overwhelmed because I'm trying to write 3 books at one time. Well, sure, of course, but that's not really most of the time where the actual, like, those deeper feelings are coming from. They're coming from the stuff that's deeper. And that whole reading is all about, for me personally, is all about having to readjust home, because things are going to shift and change again. And that's okay. I can have feels around that, but I need to work through that. And so I really, really enjoy these decks for that kind of energy, and for just really helping me kind of get beneath those things, but in a way that feels like really comforting and supportive. So that's a look at my planners and the tarot and oracle decks and the practices that I got up to throughout the month of July. I would love to know what decks you worked with, what you were up to. So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you had a wonderful July, and I wish you many blessings moving into August.